Norris is a prisoner they couldn't break, and a soldier they couldn't hold.
Look, our country has forgotten about us, and we have to do anything we can to survive.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 1985 Chuck Norris classic sequel, Missing in Action 2, The Beginning. The film is directed by Lance Houle, and of course it stars Chuck Norris as well as Soon Tek Oh and Stephen Williams. Now this film is the direct sequel, but in actual fact is a prequel to the first film, Missing in Action, that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago on the channel. Now, I did say at the time, when I reviewed the first Missing in Action film, that I didn't remember an awful lot about the second film. And that is true, to be honest. When I rewatched this one to do this review, I actually remembered very little about it. And in actual fact, I enjoyed this film far more than I expected to, if I'm honest. But for those of you who don't know, the film follows Chuck Norris's character, Colonel James Braddock, who is taken as a prisoner of war in the Vietnam War in 1972, him and quite a few of his comrades from America. They are put in a prisoner of war camp for several years and tortured and, put through hell, really, until it gets to the point where Braddock seizes his opportunity and escapes with as many people as he can. Right. What are my thoughts on Missing in Action 2, The Beginning? Well, as I said, I was pleasantly surprised by this film. I think my main criticism of the first film was it took too long for him to get to Vietnam. I thought the setup, even though they did throw in the odd fight scene and the odd action scene, I thought the setup took too long. But, once he got to Vietnam, it really picked up the film. Whereas I quite enjoyed all this film. I thought the bit where they get captured and stuff was pretty cool, and then they end up in the camp. And I think one of the real criticisms I have really is this: you never really get a sense of how long they're in there. You know what I mean? It feels like months rather than years, I suppose. It's not very good at portraying that. But what I think this film is very good at is portraying that the hell that these prisoners of war have to go through. Certainly this film, anyway. And it's a pretty brutal portrayal of the hardships that, I'm not saying real-life prisoners of war went through, but certainly these ones in this film, and it looked pretty harrowing at times. And I have previously said that I think the best acting I've seen from Chuck Norris in a film is The Hero and the Terror. Well, I think a close second is certainly for me right now is this one. I think Chuck Norris is actually quite good in this. He doesn't say a lot for big chunks of certainly the first half of the film. He kind of plays a silent protagonist because he doesn't want to antagonize the camp leader, Colonel Yin, who's particularly brutal to the prisoners, and he wants to desperately get a confession out of Braddock, and he'll do anything to get it. Once he gets this confession, he claims he will release him and his prisoners, but Braddock is refusing to give a confession because the confession will basically say that, him and his men are nothing but common criminals sort of thing, and they're, and renouncing the war and all this kind of stuff. He just won't do it. So he doesn't say an awful lot. He tries to keep out of trouble as best he can, but hey, this is Chuck Norris, and that's not going to last for long. So the tensions in the camp escalate. Some of them try to escape and fail, and then this Colonel Yin slowly but surely starts running out of patience and upping the torture until kind of Braddock seizes the opportunity to kind of make his move. I think what this film does well as well is it kind of gives an interesting dynamic in the film. The Stephen Williams character, who is an American prisoner of war as well, has kind of he kind of has become one of the guards to a large degree, because he has managed to get on the right side of the colonel and the rest of the guards and betray his own men. So he's just not popular at all with the rest of the men in the camp. And there's an interesting dynamic there between him and the rest of the American prisoners of war, who think he's absolutely detestable and a traitor. But he thinks what he's doing to survive. He's doing what it takes to survive. But the others don't see it like that. So you've got that interesting dynamic going on here in the film as well. And there's some really quite hard-hitting moments in this film as well. There's a scene where there's a soldier gets burnt alive that probably, in that moment, is some of the best acting I've seen from Chuck Norris. And from my understanding from researching little bits and pieces, preparing for this review, he only wanted one take for that scene because he kind of tapped into the loss of his brother in Vietnam. And if you don't know, Chuck Norris lost a brother in Vietnam, which is probably why these films are quite close to his heart, I suspect. So yeah, there is some quite hard-hitting scenes in this film. And then about 3/4 of the way through, maybe a little bit less, it kind of turns into a more generic Chuck Norris action film, ending on a high with a fisticuff fight between Chuck Norris and the colonel in the camp. So I think actually this is a much more well-rounded film than the first one. But as I mentioned in that first review, both these films were filmed simultaneously, and this one was going to be released first, but the powers that be, canon, thought that the one that was released first, Missing in Action, was the better film, so they wanted to release that first, probably because they thought it was more action-packed. Who knows? I actually think it was probably a mistake, and I think this one should have been released first, and the second one probably would have made more sense, or certainly tied in much nicer. I think they would have tied in together much better. But overall, I do think this was an improvement on the first one, which surprised me. I didn't expect it to be, but like I say, I couldn't remember an awful lot about it. I think the last time I watched this was well over 20 years ago, I am sure. But I really quite enjoyed it, and I'm actually quite looking forward now to Missing in Action 3. So let me know in the comments what your thought is on the Missing in Action films, and let me know what I can expect when I check out as well Missing in Action 3. So I will probably review that maybe next week or the week after. And of course, I've had some recommendations from you guys for some other Chuck Norris films that I am going to check out and review. And I certainly am revisiting Chuck Norris's back catalogue, a series of films, many of them that I haven't seen for many, many years. So thanks very much for joining me, guys. I will be back, of course, with plenty more reviews on the channel very, very soon.